Uncharted has always had its fans and naysayers. Fans love the cinematic immersive flair, and naysayers tend to write off the strengths as a distraction from where games should center their focus on. Most people can agree that, like it or not, Naughty Dog has been at the forefront of what they do when developing the series. Uncharted 4: A Thief's End is the most recent and first release for the PlayStation 4 from Naughty Dog. It also marks Naughty Dog's first time taking a franchise to a new generation of consoles, and boy does it show at times. After breaking from the Uncharted series for the critically acclaimed The Last of Us, Uncharted 4 began development under series regular Amy Hennig before she left the company. Since then, the game's creative lead was taken by Neil Druckmann and Bruce Staley, also known for their work on Uncharted 1, 2, and the already mentioned The Last of Us. Between a new generation of consoles, a change in leadership, and a return to a franchise with much of its concept drained away in the first games, Uncharted 4 boots up with plenty to prove if it really wants to create a proper Thief's End. Let's find out. Uncharted 4 is a third-person shooter, a platformer, and a puzzle game all wrapped into one. Third-person shooting is the bread and butter, being your lifeline for action through and through, but platforming is quite prominent in this outing in particular. Puzzles are here and there and throughout, and really they are never really the big focus of the games. None of the puzzles ever really struck me as especially difficult. At times they definitely bordered on clever, but that typically spawned from the story over anything more specific puzzle-wise or challenge-wise. There are a handful, and the basic role of breaking up the gameplay style when they appear is fulfilled. The main gameplay, being the TPS gunplay, is back in its traditional form from the first 3 games. You take cover-based shooting with several stock weapons on hand and take out legions of baddies across beautiful locales. Few has changed or really taken away. Hell, the most notable difference might be that you cannot throw grenades back anymore. The really interesting aspect of the game starts becoming evident when you look at the new perspective the game offers, like stealth. Uncharted 4 takes a page from The Last of Us as it offers many scenarios where silent takedowns and losing your pursuers become legitimate options. With the new movement options of swinging, sliding, and more, action-packed battles are often filled to the brim with exciting stories woven into every encounter. Speaking of movement options, platforming may well have been given the biggest upgrade of all. Snagging ropes as you fall off the slippery slopes and jumping to a surface your pick can dig into can encapsulate what more than the handholds can do for the game. It gives a sense of adventure. Previously, platforming always felt like a means to an end, and occasionally a nice way of looking at the scenery. Now, I'd argue it's actually the best part of the gameplay. The environmental designs show all of this so well, with platforming segments designed more open and with more dead ends. Shootout battlegrounds also incorporate this more open feel, as new elements in movement and stealth are certainly viable tools for your struggle. Overall, the gameplay is quite fun. It's certainly no easy task, and enthusiast-styled players, the more casual ones, may struggle at even normal difficulty at times, sort of like the previous games had at times. But the new ways to expand the tried and tested Uncharted formula in ways I never expected them to go without giving up what made it good before is something that Uncharted 4 does well. Oh, and if you follow the game's development and curious about the dialogue choices, there's like 3 in the entire game with no real consequences. But there are little choices made through actual actions throughout the game that are referenced back later on, but I'll let you discover that for yourself. Quick spoiler warning, this is the 4th game in the series in both release date and canon. Can't really talk about this story without referencing the game's premise, which spoils the early games as well. If you want to know if it's good, it's good. TLDR. So, spoilers. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Uncharted 4 takes place after the first 3 games as Nathan Drake has finally found the will to settle down and live a quote-unquote normal life. Soon enough, his brother Sam, who has conveniently never been mentioned before, shows up with the story of his jailbreak. After he fell to what seemed to be a certain death in front of Nathan's eyes on an adventure but well before any of the games before, he found himself shut within the foreign jail ever since. He tells Drake about how a drug lord, inspired by one of his stories of the great pirate Avery, broke him out and held his life hostage for finding Avery's treasure. A phone call to Elena and a lie later, Nathan and Sam head out to save his life. The call to adventure is a typical aspect of the Uncharted plot, but the connection between Drake and his brother delves into a side of the series only looked at skin deep before. Character moments are abound as Nate's initial decisions come back to haunt him, and Sam's obsession grows. Druckmann and Staley's experience from The Last of Us is apparent. While it doesn't try to replicate it, the focus on telling a great character story from beginning to end is welcomed as an approach in this series. To note, I've seen quite a few people complain about the game's slow start, as it takes a handful of chapters to really get to the shooty gun time stuff. I really can't deny this, of course. It does exactly this. But I can say that I was enthralled by what the game tried to do to a point that I never even considered the possibility of that being an issue until I saw people brought it up elsewhere. That's not to say that there isn't issues, or even so, pacing issues. Once you head out on an adventure, the game has a tendency to give a ton of dead ends, where the cast basically keeps saying, "Now go there." It's not really a big stretch that, plot-wise, very few things happen other than getting a little farther along the invisible line of arbitrary markers that feel like they're only really made by the pirate Avery in order to extend the plot just a bit longer. Now, it's also important to note what the actual main plot is. Essentially, it is the search for the greatest pirate hoard of treasure ever assembled. Purely as a new grand adventure calling, it's a bit stale and sort of just goes into the formula. The game does well to try to refresh the driving force of the story by tying it directly into the personal histories and motivations of the cast. And really, all the interesting parts of the story really just tie back to those characters in the first place. So, all in all, this is a character story. A Thief's End is a beautiful game. It's always amazing to see how much Naughty Dog can push these systems, and this is just their first outing on the PS4 so far. Between the locales, animation, and the fine details of the characters, feels like the visual border on realism so often pushed that it can be flabbergasting. The draw distance loves to show off the impressive scale of the scenery, and there are even those times the camera gives you a bit of a hint, nudge, look at it. In previous outings, Uncharted has really tackled the snow and sand on a significant scale. If 4 does the same, it's probably the water, with the underwater sections and island locales never afraid to take this often difficult effect for a ride. In general, the polish of the game visually can border on the astounding at times. This is not to say it looks perfect, the polish only has so much reach, and there are plenty of moments when you have to sit back and say, yeah, it's still a game. Character models seem to bring this up the most. Often they are blended in well, but it's easy for the game to just lose that sense of cohesiveness long enough to give that impression. The music is also not really anything special. Not that it's bad, but the novelty of the stylings for the typical Nathan Drake's Uncharted sort of music, you know what it is if you've played the series, and the use of it in a complementary role really leads it to never having an extensive impression. I've always been inclined to believe that there is one almost universal appeal to the Uncharted series: to go on an adventure. With heavy action and likable characters, the series pushes the cinematic game standard farther and farther in every release. Uncharted 4 is certainly no exception. The inclusion of a more in-depth, dramatic, and character-driven plotline helps establish yet another layer of depth to that standard. With a clear tale to tell, Naughty Dog did well at delivering this tale with what is arguably the most effective way. Slow start complainers be damned. More companies should be willing to use setup like most proper narratives, because really, that setup is so worth it. Without spoiling it, the game does plenty to leave the Uncharted name behind. A Thief's End resonates in more ways than one, and boy does the ending leave the best taste in your mouth that you could have hoped for. From gameplay, the action set pieces are the most well blended in the story than ever before. As Uncharted 2 added in the iconic scenes on a lower scale, Uncharted 3 raised the stakes with events like the classic falling out of the airplane. Uncharted 4 really grabs at what it feels like both of the previous games strive for by, instead of simply giving an exciting scene to play through, creating natural situations like escaping a crumbling clock tower, chasing a fleet of cars on the end of the rope, and even more I don't really want to spoil. The improvement to the movement options and platforming play a big part by elevating the natural gameplay platforming to levels comparable and usable within these set pieces. Oh, and I didn't play the multiplayer because honestly, I just don't give the slightest about that, and if you are upset about that, I'm sorry. It is what it is. Uncharted 4 is not one of the best games of all time. Its role in the gaming sphere leaves it in a role more similar to the action blockbusters of the movie spectrum, and the new release elevates the experience the levels never really felt before. Between the more exciting additions to the gameplay, a plot worthy of expectations, and details abound in presentation and storytelling, Uncharted 4 loves to set a really high standard. For better or worse, Uncharted 4 ends the series with a smile on my face. I'm not really sure I could be happier of how they set the series to bed, and I'm left wondering what direction the studio will go next. Savage Starlight, anyone? Either way, Uncharted 4 is a must-try experience as it best encapsulates one of the many ways video games are evolving beyond their typical roots. Yes, not everyone likes the cinematic experience type gameplay, but Uncharted 4 is one of the best examples you can try to see if it melds with your taste. Now for recommendations. Tomb Raider series, the Tomb Raider reboot stuff, that's an option. I know that both of these series have been inspired from each other quite a few times. I won't say anything more than that. People can make their own decisions on who stole from who, because people seem pretty upset about that and whenever it's brought up, but yep, they're similar. You could like both. You could go try the other one if you haven't. I haven't. I'm saying that blind. I just know that they're very similar in terms of gameplay stylings. Other than that, this is also sort of a blind one. This was recommended to me by a friend a while back, and just because of the reasons I'm mentioning here, Spec Ops: The Line, which is more of a cinematic, plot-driven, like the appeal of why you want to do it is the plot, the story, and stuff like that. And it's more of a Western take. It's a third-person shooter and stuff like that. But okay, other than that, that's all I got for you today. It's a great game. Drive safely. Have a good one. See you next time.